Hi, I'm Josh Yeary. I'm a chemical engineer and the project supervisor here at Calvary Industries. What we're going to do now is do a step-by-step walkthrough of our zirconium test that we use to determine concentrations in zirconium baths, and the product that we're going to be going over is a Vantec P610A. So I've already got some of it set up here. I've made up rough 2, 3, and 4% dilutions of a bath of P610A. So this would be mimicking what a washer would be like with 2, 3, and 4% concentration, which is part of the operational range. And I've actually already done a couple of dilutions and filled some other vials, but I'll talk through more of that in just a second. So the first step of this test is with regards to these vials. You want to make sure they're clean, no fingerprints or anything like that, because what we're actually doing with this colorimeter is shooting a beam of light through the vial. And if that light hits a fingerprint or a smudge, it can throw off the reading somewhat. So we just want to make sure those are clean before we start. The next thing we're going to do is fill up these vials with our zirconium indicator, which is a proprietary indicator that we developed here for this test. So I'm going to do that. I've already done it with these two samples, and I'll do it with this third sample right here. So it doesn't have to be super exact to the 10 mil line, but you do want to be as close as you can be, because the further away you are, the more air you're introducing into the test. So you really want to be within 1 mil of that 10 mil line for sure. So we've got that filled up. Our next step that we're going to do is actually turning on the colorimeter. So there's only 3 buttons on here that are concerning this test. We've got the power button, which I'm going to hit right here. This is the 0 button that we're going to use for calibration, and this is the checking button. So the first thing we're going to do is actually zero out this meter. So you just put the cap on your zirconium indicator and you put the vial into the colorimeter, and then you just hit the 0 button. It's going to pop up and say 0 with a bunch of extra zeros. So what we've just done is calibrated this meter. So effectively every time you do this test, you're calibrating it, and that makes sure that regardless of the lot number of zirconium indicator that you're using, that you get consistent results. And nothing's going to come in and introduce any sort of contamination or anything like that if we've got it calibrated. So now that we've done that, the next step is actually to make our dilutions of the bath that we're going to test. So I've already done that with the 2, 3, and 4% solutions. The 3 and 4% solutions, I've added 25 mils out of my bath to 75 mils of DI water to make 100 mils total. So I'm also going to do that here with my 2% solution. And again, you want to be as close as you can, but it doesn't have to be super exact. So what I'm going to do now is make sure this is mixed. If this doesn't mix, you'll get a false result. It doesn't take too much to mix it. I usually just do a couple of inversions, or if you're doing this in a beaker, you can just stir it around with a pipette. So now we've got all of our samples made. So these dilutions are ready to actually test. And the way we do that is by taking 1/10 of a mil out of each of them and putting them into the zirconium indicator. So we've actually got a pretty easy way of doing that. We've got a micro pipette and a micro pipette tip that is 1/10 of a mil. So you just put on one of the tips and you're ready to go. So important note with this is that if you push it all the way down, you'll actually pull out more than 1/10 of a mil. These are designed to have a first stop and then a second stop. So the first stop is what you use to pull out your sample, and the second stop is what you use to actually push it all out. So first stop, second stop. So we're going to do that with all of these samples that we've got ready here. So taking out my 1/10 of a mil, adding it in here, you see it's going to turn to orange or red color based on how much zirconium is actually in the sample. So now we're going to set a 2-minute timer. If it goes longer than 2 minutes, that is totally fine. It just has to go at least 2 minutes because that's how long the reaction keeps going. You could let it go for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and you get the same result as long as you've let it go for 2 minutes. But for our purposes, we're going to let it go for 2 minutes. The test in total takes about 5 minutes, really, once you get used to it. And it's actually a proprietary method, like I've said, that we developed here. It takes into account pH and iron and other contaminations that can force other competitor test methods to struggle to account for. So we've got all that accounted for. We figure it's usually accurate to within about 1/4%. Most of the time it's a lot more than that, but in some cases, if you're not quite to the lines, you'll see about 1/4%. So overall, it's a pretty accurate test method. It's very repeatable. It's very short compared with a lot of other test methods, and it takes about the same amount of time as a typical burette test would for an iron phosphate. So we're going to take the samples and put them in there. It's going to spit out our number, and then we're going to multiply that by a factor, which is different for each of our products. For this one, it is 3.84 that we're going to multiply by the reading, and then we're going to subtract 0.3 from it to get our final 2%. Gives us a number of 0.616. So over here on the calculator, we're going to multiply that by 3.84 and subtract 0.3 to get 2.07, which is very close to our 2% target. For 3%, we get 0.848 times 3.84 minus 0.3, which gives us 2.96, also very close. 4%, we get 1.150 times 3.84 minus 0.3 to give us 4.12%. So we're pretty close on all of our samples. And one thing to note too is the progression. So you'll see that the different products that we have different colors to them when you put them all together, ranging from a kind of a deep orange to a deep red, and that depends on how much zirconium you have in the product. So just a little bit of zirconium will actually give you a orange in the middle, and that is how we do our zirconium test. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to email us at Calvary Industries. My email is jyeary@calvaryindustries.com, and it's J